the lights start going out. The street lights along the street start going out. One at a time, like in a row. Poof, poof, poof.
We just looked at each other. Wow, did we do this? I mean, because we were jacked up to a street lamp, you know what I mean?
I was home, sitting here, watching television. Bingo. All the lights go off, television goes off. I go up to the roof, look out. Darkness.
It was July 13th, 1977. New York was at the beginning of what would become a brutal 10-day heat wave where temperatures were daily over 100.
Con Ed says the blackout was triggered when severe lightning knocked out transmission lines that connected Indian Point, the state's main power grid, to the city. With those lines down and with demand for power unusually high because of a heat wave, other generating plants, unable to handle the load, began cutting themselves off. It took only minutes before it was all over. New York had been disconnected from the nation's electric system.
The first reality check was a bodega right across the street from where we were playing. The gate went down.
Shoom, shoom, shoom.
All pandemonium broke, and people just started screaming blackout, and then you heard like bottles breaking and people just running, and we were like stuck out there with all this equipment. And to be out there in the blackout, you were prime, you know what I mean? You were prime for the picking.
Everybody was like, hit the stores. And it was like, hit the stores. And everybody just started running all at once.
The only lights were automobile lights, otherwise the Great White Way was pitch black. Broadway theaters and restaurants closed up while you could eat by candlelight. It was very difficult to cook by it. Thousands were stranded in the city when airlines, commuter trains, and subways were knocked out of service. Thousands of others, all ages, took to the streets just for the fun of it. After all, New York City gets blacked out only once every 12 years. And there were thousands of others who took to the streets to plunder and to pillage. Over 2,500 looters and vandals arrested during the first 8 hours of the blackout. Many more got away.
Or in need of an emergency situation where you have to have an ambulance or police, you call 911. But that is only in cases of extreme emergency.
The rest of the city had other things on their mind. Supermarkets, department stores, banks, check cashing places, jewelry stores, everything.
The morale in the police department was very low because there had been layoffs and pay freezes. So when they got the call to start showing up for work the night of the blackout, a lot of them were not inclined to do so.
We take streets to get up to Broadway. There was thousands of people in the street, carrying chairs, carrying refrigerators, carrying TVs. How are we going to arrest all these people? You know? So I says, let's get the cars over here. Take what we can take, and the rest of it, you know, the hell with it. We're putting 2 and 3 guys in the back seat. We're putting televisions in the trunks. We're putting televisions in the back seat on their laps. Sometimes we're putting 2 guys in the trunk and closing the trunk and transporting him to the precinct. Guys were making arrests left and right, and there were shots being fired. We were firing back. You know, wherever we would see a flash, boom, we open up in that direction. We were saying, we need more ammo. And the words were no longer out of my mouth. Then here comes emergency service. They start throwing us boxes of ammo, hundreds of rounds, and we're loading up. And the exchange of gunfire continued.
I remember getting on top of a bus. I started yelling to the crowd. I said, the world is watching, and cool down. Everybody's got to go home. The lights will be on soon. Everything's going to be okay. I never figured that even as hard on its luck as New York was, that the veneer of civilization was that thin, that people who were marginal people, or even in their regular lives law-abiding people, suddenly became this crowd of anarchists in it for themselves. The, Jekyll and Hyde personality came out, and people that you would never expect, the housewives, some of them. I mean, not all by any means minorities either.
I'm bugging out because church-going, upstanding citizens, the ones you know are teachers and doctors and in the community, they are now reduced to looters, thieves, and rioters. I was shocked. I was afraid. I was frightened at the sound of glass breaking, cars screeching, guns going off, and motherfucker, get away from my door. Oh, my mother sat me down. She said, son, when there is no light, man is reduced to animal.
When it was all over, I said to myself, my God, how many bodies are they going to find? They didn't find a single body, not one.
They talk about the riots, but the fact of the matter is very few people were killed, if any, were killed during that time. People weren't turning that violence outward they were doing violence to property. And they were doing violence to property specifically because they had problems with the people that owned the property.
Most people went to bed that night really not knowing what was happening around them. So people woke up the next morning, and I think there was this sense of shock. The power was still out. And the other problem was that the police had arrested thousands of people, and there was nowhere to put them.
They had to open the tombs, I remember. A prison that had been closed for many years, and people were getting bitten by rats and stuff because that place had been closed for so long.
What's going on? I began to look at people deeper than what they were showing me on the outside at age 12. It's when I became a man. People's actions, were brought on by their conditions. The message to the city is that we need help here. We're doing bad. There's nothing here for us. There's no jobs. We're housing, health care, nothing. You know what I mean? We at the end of our rope. We are just surviving by a thread.